So I think about Wyoming a lot. And I think about it especially hard when I'm driving through it, which I do a couple times a year for work. But even when I'm here in California, I think about Wyoming maybe once a week at least. And the reason for that is because of the United States Senate, um, which I think about every day, multiple times a day, unfortunately. So I'll explain why, but I'm going to back up just a little bit and say, I think that while I wish Donald Trump wasn't president, there's a lot of really good opportunity for those of us on the left in this presidency. And when I say those of us on the left, I do not mean Democrats. I specifically do not mean Democrats. If you vote for Democrats like I do, you are more than welcome to this conversation. But I do not mean the Democratic Party. What I mean is people on the left. And what I mean by us having a lot of opportunity in this is, for most of us, the established order needed to be torn down. We believe it needs to be torn down. It's broken beyond repair. We are not necessarily reformists. We are in favor of some kind of revolution in varying degrees on the left. The existing system needs to be torn down. And Donald Trump is doing a lot of that. And the way he's doing it, what he's going to do to replace all of that, a lot of other components to this, I don't care for it. I don't like it. I think it's awful. But that being said, it was never going to be good, right? Like, you were never going to tear down a lot of these systems that are in place in a way that wasn't going to lead to some pain, right? Now, I think it's greater because of Donald Trump and Elon Musk than it needs to be, but it certainly was never going to be painless. You were never going to tear down an economic system that controls essentially the entire world, and a political system that controls the largest country, the largest economy in the world. You're just never going to tear all that stuff down without hurting a lot of people. So better that it be on them than it be on us. And even better, as the country realizes the folly of what Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the Republicans put in place to replace what they are tearing down, and when they realize how bad that is and how exploitative that is and how much worse it is than our current system, the left has an opportunity to step in and really make some vast changes to the political order. And I'm obviously describing all of this very high level. I don't mean in almost any of this in terms of electoral politics. A lot of things have to happen here. It's not just like, oh, hey, everyone has realized they don't like what Donald Trump has done. Now it's our turn. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be a lot that happens here. But I'm just, at the highest level, the pendulum has swung towards the right, and it swung towards the right, and then Donald Trump and the GOP grabbed hold of it and are yanking it all the way to the right. And I think the majority of people are going to be really unhappy about that, which is going to give us the opportunity to grab hold of it and yank it back. And the reason why I say this isn't about Democrats is because I think the biggest thing we risk, or the biggest hurdle for us in getting the world that we want, is the Democrats grabbing a hold of that pendulum and swinging it here or here. Well, probably even here. You know what I mean? We need to grab that fucker and tear it over here. And the Democrats will stop us from doing that. That's the problem. And this current Democratic Party, oh God, I don't even think they'll be able to reach it. They'll let the pendulum swing, and then swing right back over to Donald Trump or the Republicans or whatever shows up on the new right to replace them. That's why I spend so much time hammering on the Democrats, because I really do believe they are our greatest threat, as people who are trying to change the world order, trying to, maybe retire at some point, have a life that's fulfilling, that's not constantly surrounded by doom and gloom and exploitation. People who want to, live their lives and enjoy their lives and have a planet that's not constantly being poisoned, all these kinds of things, all the sort of stuff that we would like to enjoy. I really do believe Democrats are standing in our way more than anything else. The Republicans are what they are. Every opportunity to grab hold of that pendulum is just, it's like here's the left trying to grab it, and the Democrats swat it out of the way and grab hold of the pendulum and then kind of like throw it back to the Republicans. And so, yeah, I don't, I have a lot of issues with the Democrats, and that's why I spend a lot of time talking about them. Anyway, I do believe that we need to spend time talking about like what are like the big reforms that need to happen in order for us to have a more democratic society, a more equitable society, a less exploitative society, both exploitative of people but also exploitative of the environment. You know, what are like the big reforms that we would want? You know, one of the questions that I think is really illuminating is like, what would the Democrats have done if they had switched places with Donald Trump, right? Like if the Democrats had won the House and the Senate and had the White House and shit, maybe even had a majority of seats on the Supreme Court, what would they be doing right now? And none of us have an answer to that question. The Democrats don't have an answer to that question, but they sure as shit want to still take back power, right? Like, you know, they'll scramble to try to run on what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing, but with no vision still for what they are offering the American people. And with that, they will continue to fail, and they will continue to, at most, bring in a lackluster majority, and they'll just keep kind of shitting the bed. And so I really want to talk about these kind of like bigger ideas, and what are like these big structural reforms that we would like to see in place. And that brings me to Wyoming. Wyoming is, in a lot of ways, like the exact opposite of California, where I live. It is the least populated state. California is the most populated state. Wyoming has about 500,000, 550,000 people. Some people don't realize that. It is very small. There are counties in California, towns in California, you'd barely call them cities in California, that have more people than the entire state of Wyoming. California has about 38, 39 million people. Wyoming has 500,000, 550,000. It's landlocked, we're coastal, the size of California geographically, way bigger than Wyoming. The climate's different, the economies are different. Just, you cannot imagine two states that are more different. And the portion of the United States economy that is like dependent on California is pretty significant, whereas the portion of the United States economy that's dependent on Wyoming is pretty insignificant. Yet, Wyoming and California both are represented in the United States Senate by 2 senators. This is because of equal representation in the United States Senate, which has been the lay of the land since our founding. And if I were to be given the opportunity to reform one thing in our government, it would be to reform the apportionment in Congress, specifically getting rid of the United States Senate and expanding the House of Representatives. There are a lot of issues with how the House of Representatives is apportioned and how the seats are, you know, over gerrymandered districts. Don't get me wrong, but you know, we can't do this like one size fits all reform. But one of the biggest things, and for me the biggest thing, would be to get rid of the Senate and update the House of Representatives. I wrote a paper on this a couple of years ago, and I believe it with all of my being. And so I want to spend some time in a couple of videos and live streams really talking about that and really fleshing that idea out and putting some information out to people about this and about why I believe it and like what the impacts of the Senate are on just politics in the United States, political parties, lobbyists. It touches everything. And there's a really great book called Sizing Up the Senate. And it's by Francis E. Lee and Bruce I. Oppenheimer. And this was written 26 years ago. I read it for that paper that I wrote, and I had a copy of it that I had annotated, and I can't fucking find it anywhere, and it's really upsetting to me. But while I was driving through Wyoming a couple of weeks ago, I was like, you know, I really want to talk about the Senate, and I want to talk about abolishing the Senate, and I want to do some videos about it. And I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and buy the book again. So I bought the book again. So there's a fresh, brand new, crisp copy And I'm gonna do a couple live streams. At least one this week. I would like to try to do two this week, but at least one this week. I'm planning for tomorrow, Tuesday night, and I'm just gonna read the introduction to this in the live stream, and then I'll record that and I'll post it as a video later on. But I thought it'd be a good opportunity to kind of like read a chapter and then just do like some, conversation afterwards if you guys are able to join. So I'm thinking about doing that tomorrow. I think I'm going to do it at 9 o'clock Pacific time, 9 p.m. Pacific time. That might be a little late for everyone, but if you're unable to join, like I said, I'll record it. And if I have people who want to try to join a live stream and like it kind of picks up on any of this, I can do one that's earlier, but it's just hard for me to do it really early in the day, especially because I know a lot of people are working anyway. So I'll just do it for later on at night when I have some time to read. Anyway, so the first like chapter of this book, the introduction, really goes into some of these ideas, and it talks about a little bit of the history behind how we ended up with that apportionment scheme in the Senate. But the second chapter really does get into that history, talks about what's called the Great Compromise, which is how we ended up with a Senate that represents each state equally, and a House of Representatives that does each state based on population. It talks about kind of like the different ways in which this has panned out throughout our history. One thing that I'm doing today to get ready for that live stream tomorrow is there's a chart, and I'm going to share this with you right now in the book, but that I'm getting updated data for, because like I said, it's 26 years old. It's all still very relevant, because we were still operating under the same constitution, but a lot of the data is a little bit older. So this is what's called the minimum percentage of the nation's population that's able to elect a Senate majority. So think of it this way. The bottom 25 states, as far as population, or I guess 26 technically, as far as their population, so the 26 least populous states, that if all of them voted for the same party as far as their Senate representation, they would be able to elect the majority in the Senate, right? Because each state has 2 senators. So that would equal 52 senators, which is a majority of the Senate. Those 26 least populated states may be over half of the states, but they're not over half of the population of the United States, right? Because population is so unequally distributed between the states. So there's a chart here, and I think you can see it. Yeah, there we go. This shows the minimum percentage of the population of the entire United States that would be necessary in order to elect that 52 senators. At no point in the United States history has that number ever gone above 35%. So you've never needed half of the population of the United States in order to elect half of the Senate. It's always been under 35%. And where it currently sits, so in this book, where it had sat was at about 18%, and currently it's at about 16%. So you only need about 16% of the population of the United States in order to elect a majority in the Senate. That's fucked, to put that, in political, in like the technical political science terminology. That's fucked. And so that's the reason why I bring up Wyoming, because Wyoming's population, and I just looked it up really quick. That's why there's a little cut in my filming, because I wanted to give you guys the accurate information here. All this I've been pulling out of my head because, like I said, I think about it all the time. But currently sits at about 587,000 people. California's population sits at 39.43 million. So 39,430,000. Just the change on that, right, is almost as many. If you were going to round down, you would be rounding down to 39 million, and you would be cutting out about 430,000 people. That's about the population of Wyoming. Anyway, so if you divide the population of California, which is, like I said, 39.43 million, by the population of Wyoming, which is 587,618, you end up with about 67 is the number. So each person in Wyoming, their vote is worth about 67 times as many as, or as much as the same human being in California. That's how much more powerful the people who vote for their senator in Wyoming are than your average Californian, and it has tons of impacts, which are a lot of which are explained in this book. And it's not just like a left-right thing either. I know a lot of times people on the right tend to defend systems like this way more often, or way more than people on the left. But I think as we saw in the last election, it's really not about left versus right. Think for instance, the state of Texas or Florida, both big population states. Think small population states like New Mexico or Rhode Island or Delaware. None of those states should have, the ones I did, the low population Democratic states I just mentioned, none of them should have the same representation in Congress or in the Senate as Florida or Texas. And it's not a system that you would intentionally design for our current country. And there was actually, a lot of times people talk about this like, this is what the founders wanted, as if the founders are a monolith. James Madison, who is largely considered to be the father of the Constitution, did not want this. So there's a lot of history behind this compromise and what led to it. A lot of history of how it has played out over the years. A lot of really great stuff in this book. So I'm going to read some selected chapters from it, like I said, in my live streams, and then I'll post the videos from it. It's just a little series I want to do. And I'd love your guys' engagement with it and conversation about it. And I just want to have conversations about these bigger ideas. Because like I said, there's going to come a point where the pendulum is ready to swing back towards us. And if all we have are A, the Democratic Party, and B, no like big reforms that can help to change this country and put it on a better trajectory, I think we'll just fumble that moment. And I think that getting rid of the Senate is one of the big things that we should be advocating for. I think we should amend the Constitution to get rid of the Senate and expand the House of Representatives. I will post on my story when exactly the live stream will be tomorrow. Like I said, I'm thinking about 8 or 9 o'clock Pacific time. And I will see you then.